Once again, as the shadows of night fall graciously upon the major metropolitan city in the Midwest, the boy in the box to his eye cautiously enters Uwala. Good evening, boogie checkers, and a good evening to you. Is this a functional unit?
Yes, it is.
Once again, Boogie Checkers broadcast. What follows has nothing to do with anyone's reality. Most of all, me, John Landecker, host and creator of the Boogie Checker Life, who's not quite as mean as he seems as during this segment.
I'd like to welcome and thank everyone for coming out today to share this great day in Michigan City history. Also, I'd like to thank Jessica Rozier and the staff here at the Barker Mansion for allowing us to have our ceremony here on this beautiful historic property. And with all that being said, let's celebrate John Records Landecker Day. Who's singing? John, she was going to be here because she wanted to meet you, the lady who sang that song. That was Tara Miller from our Michigan City Senior Center.
Fantastic.
She came into the studio and she recorded that song and she cried as she was singing it. So. That's a very good thing. So, again, I want to thank everybody for coming. People are going to get up here today and talk about John. It's all going to be good, John. And then we're going to give you some major awards that you so richly deserve. The first person I want to introduce, he drove all the way here from Chicago. He used to be John's producer at WJMK, his co-writer of his book, and his publisher, Mr. Rick Kempfer.
That's right, I've got a speech. For my generation of radio fans, there was no bigger star than John Records Landecker. His night show on WLS was appointment listening, and I know because I was one of those that listened. He was entertaining and quick-witted. His bits like Boogie Check were something that we listened to every night, even though we knew we were going to hear the worst music ever recorded in the history of mankind, because the 70s were not kind to popular music. We'd have to sit through The Night Chicago Died or Seasons in the Sun, but we did it for you, John, because we loved you. John was already a legend when I met him more than 20 years ago. He had already been awarded the Best Personality of the Year by Billboard magazine. He was just months away from being asked to be part of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But honestly, it wasn't until I worked side by side with him that I got to really appreciate the brilliance of John Landecker. I was his producer for 10 years when he was the morning man at Magic 104 in Chicago, and from the very first day, he treated me like an equal, which I most certainly was not. But I always appreciated that. He encouraged me to contribute. He listened to my ideas. He made good ideas great. He made great ideas into things that people still talk about today. And he never, ever ran out of ideas himself. He was like a bottomless pit of ideas. And I learned to trust him, even though some of the ideas sounded a little bit crazy. When he said to me, you know, Rick, what I really want to do is get an Elvis impersonator and have him show up in people's homes at 6 o'clock in the morning and wake them up by singing Elvis songs. What do you think? My first thought was, there are many things that could go wrong, but I trusted him and we did it, and it was amazing, and Elvis was never shot. Although he did find contraband once, remember that? When he suggested that it was time to celebrate his generation, the baby boomers, and he wanted to find some way to pay tribute to them, he decided the best way to do that would be to dress up as a baby on stage in a diaper and carrying a giant baby bottle. Didn't question him. I went with it. It was hilarious, of course. I came home to my wife and I said, can you please make a size 36 male diaper? And she did. That's the kind of bits that we used to do. When he said it was time to sell Girl Scout cookies, and he would like to do it wearing a Girl Scout uniform, I went to the Husky department of the Girl Scout store and got him a nice uniform. I was known on the air as Rick the German Boy because of my heritage, so he thought it would be funny if I dressed up in lederhosen and led the crowd in the chicken dance. Which I agreed to, not realizing that we'd be doing it at Lamb's Farm in Libertyville in front of 20,000 people. And if you think you know what the Twilight Zone is like, you've never stood in front of 20,000 people dressed in lederhosen, watching them all go na 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 na. There was another time when John knew that I loved the movie The Sound of Music. And I had a crush on the girl that played Liesl. Charmian Carr was the actress's name. So he thought it'd be funny to book Liesl on the show, which he did. And he transcribed the love scene between Rolf and Liesl. And when she came into the studio, he handed her a script and he handed me a script, unbeknownst to both of us, and said, "You're going to do the love scene now." So I was 3 feet away from Liesl when she looked at me and she said, "Oh, Ralph." And I got to admit, to this day, one of the highlights of my life. So thank you for giving me that. When John is enthusiastic about something, he can bring everyone along for the ride. He's like John Belushi in Animal House. You know, was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? No, it wasn't. Come on! And we'd all follow him. We'd all follow him wherever he wanted to go because he had that kind of enthusiasm. And we knew that wherever that guy was going, we wanted to be there because it was going to be fun. And one of the places that he got enthusiastic about was the state of Indiana. He talked about it a lot. He spent a good deal of his childhood here. There's a lot of stories about growing up in Indiana in the book. Records Truly is my middle name. I won't tell them to you now because I'm guessing he's going to tell them in a little bit. But if he doesn't tell the story about padiddles... Oh, you got that one? Okay. If he doesn't talk about pig castration?
No.
Okay, I'll tell you that one later.
No.
That's in there?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm not going to tell you anymore because I want to ruin it for him. So when I can say that not only is John deserving of this award, but I know that he's appreciative of it. And you can tell this by looking at him. You don't have to guess with John. He wears his heart on his sleeve. What you see is what you get. He does not have an insincere bone in his body. And when he asks you how your family is doing, he actually cares about how your family is doing. He really wants to know. And for my family, all three of my boys were born on the radio, on John's show. And I don't mean that symbolically, I mean that literally. I was in the delivery room with a phone, calling the show, giving a play-by-play of what was going on for all three boys. And those tapes are something that I really treasure to this day. My oldest is 22 now, so we still listen to those tapes all the time. They're funny. There was only one time my wife, who, by the way, should be given the sainthood of the Wabash Award for allowing me to do this. She only one time made me turn off the radio in the delivery room, and that's when John was cracking jokes when the anesthesiologist was in there. He was calling him Shakes. And Bridget thought, maybe I want the anesthesiologist to not be shaking because he's laughing. That was the only time. But so, when I say that John made us feel like family, we really were like family. And he made me feel like I was part of his. I met his kids. I met his brother and family. I met 3 of his 4 wives. I met his dad. When his dad passed away, we all went up to the funeral because, that's what you do. You're family. And I'm very proud of what we did together on the radio on WJMK. Proud to be associated with one of the all-time greats. Proud to be his co-author and friend. And I'm happy to see that Indiana sees fit to recognize this man because he is a Hall of Famer and one of the greatest of all time. John Records Landecker.
Okay, Okay, John, if you look right behind you right now, Tara Miller is sitting there. She's the one that sang that song for you.
The senior center? That's not the image I had.
No. Okay, there are many people that wanted to be here today, government officials, to speak on John's behalf. Unfortunately, with everything that's going on in the world and the country, some of them couldn't be here. So at this time, I'd like Ron Miller to come up, and he has something to read to you and John.
Thanks, Mike. I was just thinking, John, next year will be my 50th year in broadcasting. Of course, I was very young when I started, but I actually made it into John's book. I think it was only maybe 2 lines or something like that, but it did actually happen. John had moved to the Michigan City area and wanted to be involved in local radio, and we had a mutual friend who told me that John might like to talk to me about radio. And I said, well, I'd be happy to talk to him about radio, but I'm not sure exactly where I would put him. And that made it into his book. Thank you very much. Senator Joe Donnelly was here last Friday, and you may have seen him. You may have seen him on the national news. He was on the floor of the Senate yesterday talking about the North Korea situation. But I asked him if he would record something just brief to congratulate John on this very important day. Except I turned the sound down. You're gonna.
I want to congratulate John Landecker on John Landecker Day. That I spent many, many years of my life listening to him. He put smiles on my face when my car wasn't running. At least my car radio was, and it was always a privilege to have him as a big part of my life.
Joe really wanted to be here today, and so he sent this to me instead. John didn't know about this until just now. I'm going to read this. This is a letter that was sent, and thanks to Joe's office in Indianapolis and Washington for arranging this. It says, Dear Mr. Landecker, as United States Senator for Indiana, it's my distinct pleasure to congratulate you on your upcoming induction into the National Radio Hall of Fame and Sagamore of the Wabash recognition. These are prestigious awards honoring your more than 40 years of radio broadcast experience, many successful radio shows, and contributions to Indiana. Through the years, your tireless commitment and dedication to listeners across Indiana has helped enrich and educate Hoosier lives. Your work is a critical resource for our state. I include myself among those who have enjoyed your programming. Hoosiers are proud of you, of all you have accomplished, and your inclusion among an elite group of individuals who are both in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the National Radio Hall of Fame. Once again, I congratulate you on these prestigious honors. I sincerely hope you are enjoying your well-earned retirement and wish you the best in your future endeavors. Sincerely, Joe Donnelly, United States Senate.
Okay, and now I'd like Candace Silvas to come up. Candace is on our Michigan City Common Council, and she wanted to say some words about John.
Hey. All right. It is a little strange for me to be standing in front of you today on a place that's getting ready to introduce John Landecker, because in my work as Executive Director of Sandcastle Shelter for Homeless Families and a City Council representative, normally John is introducing me on his show. That introduction is then followed by this ridiculously extra sugary rendition of the song, I Want Candy. I only wish I had a song just as obnoxious to play for him right now. But seriously, John, you're in the Radio Hall of Fame. That's the best you can come up with. Why don't you think about Alicia Keys' song, Superwoman, for next time? Good. All right. I listened to Mike's... Yeah, funny, right? He's a cohort on this. Don't let him look innocent back there. I listened to Mike's and John's Tropical Oldies show last week with the knowledge that I was listening to a radio legend. He's already in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Surely a man with the middle name of Records would have a selection of classic oldies that would brighten my day. Then he played Ringo. Not the famous Beatles drummer. Instead, it's the title performed, and I use that term loosely, by none other than Lauren Green. That's right, Ben Cartwright from Bonanza singing. Kind of. That's what Hall of Fame radio is. As a lifelong resident of Michigan City, it's phenomenal to see a legend like John choose this place as his home, and he quickly wove his talents into our community. He talks about us in his book, Records as Truly My Middle Name, copies of which I'm sure John has available for sale. I understand there's a new edition, yes? What is it called?
Same thing.
Same thing, but it's the Hall of Fame edition, right? That's right. In his book, he says the best thing about working here is meeting the fine folks of Michigan City. Then he went on to specifically mention one of my favorite Michigan City businesses, a Sandcastle supporter, and an all-around favorite person, Captain Ed Buechner. He calls Captain Ed's a one-of-a-kind store and urges his readers to visit, telling them, "You can thank me later." John's invitation to his radio show for the community events I'm involved with is one of the examples of the pride he shows in our city. From sharing the success stories from Sandcastle to help promoting the Trivia Fest benefiting the elementary school sports program, of which he is an esteemed member of the Educated Guessers, John and his co-host, Mike Dempsey, showcase our community to their audience. They inspire community engagement and promote an awareness that is Michigan City. That is the John Records Landecker that I know. John will soon be inducted into the Hall of Fame for his work a long time ago. But on behalf of the City Council of Michigan City, I want to honor you today, John, for standing tall in our community. So thank you for all you do to us. Evidently, I get to introduce the person who does so much for our community every single day, my colleague, Mayor Ron Meer.
Thank you, Candace. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and it's a great pleasure to be here. You know, Mr. Dempsey just informed me that this was a roast a few minutes ago, and I really wasn't prepared for that, but it's not going to be that tough, I don't believe. You know, John has brought so much fun to our community, and I really appreciate that. To have this great treasure is based in Michigan City, if you want to say that, in your foundation and your heritage is here, and I really appreciate that, John, and thank you for that. You know, you make me laugh, and a lot of people don't make me laugh, and I don't know if you do it accidentally or you do it on purpose. I'm not quite sure, but and that's true. I mean, I like to joke around, and I like to, you know, have some comedic relief from time to time, but not a lot of people make me laugh. But when I sit down with you, and I think your subtle jokes and things, it humors me. So the one story I always share with them, and I don't really get a lot of comment out of it, is through grade school and middle school, you know, you had the radio on the bus, and if you were behaving on the bus driver would let you listen to the radio. Well, through middle school, I was listening to Mr. Landecker on the radio, and I think he thinks back about what year that was when I was in middle school. Let's see, left 6th grade in 1976, 75, somewhere in there, and so. But as many throughout Northwest Indiana, Chicago region, we listened to you every opportunity we had, and you were different, you were unique, you were unorthodox, and you still are. You still have tons of ideas, which I think have rubbed off on Mr. Dempsey, because he comes to me with an idea every week of some new venture. We should try this or try that, and I appreciate your surprise that our senior senator individuals there. You seemed a little shocked that you thought it was a member of the. Well, she is a member. She runs the establishment as the director, but I thought that was pretty interesting, Con. So with that, I'd like to read an official proclamation of the City of Michigan City, Indiana, on behalf of Mr. John Landecker. Whereas William J. Records and Ione Records were owners of a farm in Hopewell, Indiana. William and Ione Records gave birth to Marjorie Victoria Records. Marjorie Records married Warner Landecker and produced 2 sons, Thomas and John. Whereas choosing to use Marjorie's maiden name as John's middle name, they had no idea that their son would become a legendary radio disc jockey, or that his middle name would become his calling card. Some of John's favorite childhood memories are visiting his grandparents in Indiana Farm and attending the Indiana State Fair. Whereas, after living and working in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Chicago, Illinois, and Canada, John decided to call Michigan City, Indiana his hometown, finding property to accommodate the large breed dogs that he continues to rescue this very day. And whereas, on November 2nd, 2017, at the Museum of Broadcast Communications in Chicago, Illinois, John Records Landecker will be inducted into the National Radio Hall of Fame, an honor bestowed upon him by thousands of professionals in the radio industry. And whereas it is John's desire to host a radio show in Michigan City, Indiana that streams live around the world, continuing his unparalleled career while promoting our beautiful city to his legions of fans, which span generations. Now therefore, I, Mayor Ron Meer of the City of Michigan City, Indiana, do hereby proclaim Friday, September 8th, 2017 as John Records Landecker Day in the City of Michigan City. And I call upon our citizens to recognize and thank Mr. John Records Landecker for his dedication, spirit, humor, and humility as he represents the citizens, admired by generations of individuals in the Michigan City community, and who have been fortunate enough to have had their lives touched by this iconic Michigan City gentleman, Mr. Landecker. And I would just end with that I look forward to continuing to work with you, John, in the community, enjoying that, and I hope you can continue to make me laugh because I can sure use it from time to time. So with that, it is my great pleasure to introduce our state representative from Michigan City, Indiana, and our great representative downstate, Mr. Scott Pelath.
Thank you so much, Mayor. In public service, you get asked to do all sorts of things. And for most of them, you approach it as you would just doing a job. You go to work, there's tasks to be done, you complete them. And then there's other things you do out of a sense of duty. You don't want to do them, but you do them anyways. And then occasionally something comes along and you approach it with jubilation. And Mike Dempsey called me and said, Scott, our friend John Landecker is going to be inducted into the National Radio Hall of Fame. How about talking to the governor about honoring him with the Sagamore of the Wabash, which is the state's highest distinction? And I just flew out of my chair. I said, absolutely, I want to get this done. And before doing though, I reflected a little bit about what John Landecker means to me personally. And I was actually thinking about this on the way over. And I've never shared this with him before, but I can remember being a 14-year-old kid. And 14-year-old boys are not the most elegant and eloquent things to grace the planet. And I remember going through a very awkward stage, and I didn't want to be that way anymore. And I got the idea I was going to take guitar lessons. I was going to pick up the guitar, and people would like me then. By the way, something that I continue doing to this very day. And it was 1984, and I would turn on WLUP, and I would listen to John Landecker. And I would try to figure out what I would be capable of playing. And it started off like everyone else with Smoke on the Water, but then I think I graduated to Godzilla by Blue Oyster Cult, and I went down the list. And I learned my set and what to work on with the voice of John Landecker in the background. And that's what I hope he realizes. He's part of us growing up. You do radio for that long, people come of age, and they often become better, transformed people. It's a process, and not many people get to be part of something like that. And he's ubiquitous in that regard. And I went to the governor and I said, you know, John Landecker is somebody that deserves the Sagamore of the Wabash. Let's run over his case a little bit. And of course, it wasn't very hard to do. He was just about to get a national recognition for his decades in radio. But it goes a little bit deeper than that. He actually, in my opinion, transformed the media. I even noted the other day that no less a person than Rush Limbaugh, and I'm talking about the pre-politics Rush Limbaugh, cited our friend John as an influence. The art of doing radio, the technical aspects, are indelibly influenced by the work that he has done. You know, when he started WLS, that was back in the days, I believe it reached almost 3/4 of the country. Over 30 states. I don't think we have that type of wattage anymore. And top 40 AM radio, perhaps for the better, is not a format like it used to be. But there are DJs and radio personalities throughout the country that can cite John as either the reason they got into the business or somebody from whom they learned how to do the work. And I know that's part of the reason for his induction, but it's also part of the reason that he's going to be honored with the Sagamore of the Wabash, because it's for people that have done the right things and done the work, but it's also for people that have inspired others and have given back to their professions, given back to their community, given back to their state. And the governor absolutely agreed that John Records Landecker should be the state's newest Sagamore of the Wabash. And before we unveil this thing, I want to explain a little bit about the award. In 1945, World War II was coming to a close, and there was a summit between the leaders of Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. And the Kentucky governor was going to give the Indiana governor a Kentucky colonelship. There was no commensurate Indiana award. So the governor at the time, by the name of Ralph Gates, created the Sagamore of the Wabash. And Sagamore comes from an Algonquin word meaning wise one, leader, one of whose opinion might be respected and regarded. And ever since then, it's been an honor that's been given to people for whom the chief executive of the state of Indiana can call upon for advice and wisdom. And I can't think of a better person to get it here today. So let's take the pink sheet off, and let's give a big round of applause to our newest state Sagamore, John Records Landecker.
Thank you. Nice job. I just gave you the flu. There is hey, you know, he did a lot of stuff for Indiana. But, you know, before there was radio, first of all, thank you, Mayor Meer and Governor Holcomb, Senator Donnelly. I played Ringo because we had just played the Beatles. No, we had just played Ringo. Photograph, I think it was, right? So funny, except to young people, such as yourself. Thank you, Rick. If you wondered why I didn't approach him to shake his hand or hug him when he said all those fine words about me, he does not like to be hugged because he is German. And we've been through that many times. Did I thank everybody? Thanks, Scott. That was great. Great to see you here. I always wondered where that one listener to my show on the Loop was, and now I found him. But you know, long before there was radio, there was Indiana, and as you've heard, and I'll probably repeat here, from the moment I could breathe, literally, family vacations during the summer and Christmas were spent on my grandfather's farm in Hopewell, Indiana. Now, at that time, there was no interstate. So it was 2-lane highways and country roads, past Burma Shave signs, past barns, past mail pouch tobacco painted on their side, past schools, past churches, which is why as an adult I teared up at the beginning of Hoosiers, because Gene Hackman is in this car that was very similar to the one my family had. And he's driving over Indiana country roads that could easily have been leading to my grandfather's farm. I was born and raised in Ann Arbor, Michigan, but I think you could say I grew up in Indiana. It was at my Uncle Roscoe's farm that my cousin David taught me how to ride a two-wheel bike. It was in Indiana that I learned the meaning of padiddle. For those of you who don't know, a padiddle is an oncoming car with one headlight out. And I don't know who came up with this, but when this happens, you're supposed to kiss your date. And I learned that on a blind date, and I was sort of sorry I had to go through with it. But you know, I was on my Uncle Hugh's farm it was on my Uncle Hugh's farm that I stacked bales of hay from the bottom of the barn all the way to the top. It was also on that farm that I held young piglets so that a vet could come over and snip, castrate them. Now, bear with me a little bit. I have a little show and tell. This is, these are some of the many blue ribbons my grandmother won at the Indiana State Fair, 1952, 53, 54, and 55. You could also see an article there in the local paper. I would like to point out that today is September 8th, 2017, and this article was published September 8th, 1954. And it says, in part, this one-time 4-H leader in Franklin Township has been copping prizes for her state entries for 25 years. Her ribbons, laid end to end, would stretch from here to way out there. Which, that's not good writing, is it? No. To way out there. My father, Warner S. Landecker, was not born in Indiana. He was a Jewish immigrant who fled the Nazis in World War II. He got out on a student visa through the University of Michigan and somehow ended up teaching graduate school at IU, where he met my mother. Now, there is a story on my mother's side of the family that my grandfather played trumpet in the KKK marching band, but dropped out when he found out what their prejudices were and what they really were about. So I've tried to imagine what it would be like for my grandfather's daughter to bring home to the farm in Indiana a Jew from Germany and say, we're going to get married. It must have gone extremely well, because I got to tell you, in my entire life, I have never heard one negative word, one innuendo, one slight, one anti-Semitic comment from any of my relatives in Indiana, because I figure, my experiences with Hoosiers are direct. Okay, we're not messing around. Matter of fact, I'm guessing that it somehow went along the lines of, if that's who she loves, it's good enough for me. End the story. Pass the tomatoes. You know what I mean? Done and done. Plus, it's obvious that they didn't raise their children to be prejudiced. They loved my dad, they loved me, and boy, do I love them. And considering the world we live in today, I'm very proud to be a member of that family. And last but not least, you can thank Indiana for the phrase, "Records truly is my middle name," as you've learned earlier. My mother's maiden name, Marjorie Victoria Records, as the firstborn. Records, the family name, was given to me as my middle name, and it's been 70 years. And I'm sure I still have not heard the last of it. It is? Really? That's your name? Again, I would like to express my appreciation to all those who were involved in making this day happen, but a special shout out to Mike Dempsey, who I am sure, even though he won't admit it, got the ball rolling. He's a great guy, a great radio partner, but most of all, a great friend. You know, I was looking at that award because it says it's presented to an individual for their contributions to the state of Indiana. Well, to me, this award isn't about what I did for the state of Indiana. It's what the state of Indiana has done and still does for me. So thank you. Oh, wait! Educated guessers! Eat the snakes! Thank you.
Congratulations, John.
Hold on a second.
Okay. There's more.
I don't believe it. Wow. When I was over at WJMK working the morning show, one of my favorite people to work with was Leslie Kyling, who also went on to be part of the WGN radio staff, and is sitting right there. Amazing. Wow. That's all.
Okay, thank you, John. I'm just going to say a couple more words, and this time it's going to be about me. I am totally aware that I am probably one of the luckiest people in the radio industry today, because I get to sit on the other side of the glass with John for 4 hours every week, not counting our pre-show meetings at Galveston Steakhouse every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday nights. But I know how lucky I am, and thank you, John. Before we wrap up, I want to open up the floor. Does anybody want to come up and tell a John Landecker story, or Rick, do you have anything else you want to talk about, or don't look at John?
Yeah, not suitable for work.
Okay. All right, I want to thank everybody for coming, and this has been a fantastic day. Enjoy John Records Landecker Day today. Thank you, John.
94.7 WLS, John Records Landecker, my final show here on 94.7 WLS.